is going to be Geshe Sonam and myself, our last class for about 2 weeks. So Geshe and myself will be traveling to the Netherlands. Geshe is going to be teaching there. If you're in Europe and you're curious about that, you can go to Maitreya.org. I think that's the website for Maitreya Institute, which is an FPMT center in the Netherlands. And on the Friday of this coming week, there'll be a very special guest at Lama Yeshe Yangten Rinpoche, a young Lama who works with His Holiness. And he'll be giving a teaching on the Sangye Chutsukma, the Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer. Unfortunately, because he is very popular, we had to book him during an evening time slot. So that's when he was available. But everything will be available on YouTube and Facebook to watch later if you're interested. So I believe that starts, is it 7 p.m. on
Yep.
Friday, Dave? So
Yep.
that'll start on 7 p.m. on Friday. It'll go for about an hour, and then there'll be half an hour for question and answer with Rinpoche. Then the first week of September, the Labor Day weekend, we'll have a break. Some of our volunteers are going to be at the FPMT North America meeting in California, so we'll have a break that first week of September. And then the first Sunday in September, we will continue with this series on the new topic of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara and the Heart Sutra. I imagine that we'll also offer an oral transmission. Geshe will give an oral transmission for the Heart Sutra and also the obstacle dispelling prayer connected with the Heart Sutra. And then as we go through September, we'll continue with those on Sunday, and then the Vajrayogini commentary will continue on the 21st. And we also have some other programming things that are sort of in the pipeline, and as those get clarified, we will let you know. So I think that we are now almost at time, so please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee. I'll invite Geshe down, and we'll get started soon. Geshe is like, will Hedrup have to get up again? The answer is, we don't know yet. So hi, everybody. Can you hear my voice clearly? Great. Okay, and could you hear Geshe clearly when he was speaking?
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
All right, good. And it looks like we're streaming. Yeah, so we are good to go.
Yes, ma.
No, it's okay.
Oh, yeah, ta congratulations. Tani kanga keyboard tani ta page. Na loju ina yari no indoshi rawachi moyos.
So first of all, Tashi Dele, greetings to all. Geshe hopes that all of you are well and that all of your studies and practice are improving.
Ani ta zo de ta nganzu kanga ta leka che de semba de ta page de ze joando ne ta yari ndoshi ta ore wajagi yari te joando shi rawayos.
And so also, as we are practitioners, right, we practice with the hope that our mind is going to improve a bit, that our mind is going to be trained a little bit. So Geshe also hopes that you are finding that your mind is improving.
Ani 치 tani ka chenpo che la sonji ngaro sol la ja che la. Ani so semba zombo che yopo che toba ina so nyen da wo, jan da wo, ngen da wo chabares.
So the Buddha explains that actually, if we are one who practices loving kindness, for example, then one who practices one's loving kindness is one's own best friend, is one's own refuge. One doesn't need so much beyond that, actually.
Ta so tani noto mombo che, tani ta tiala tani ta saki ya kange mombo che so dan da wo chabares.
However, if our mind is untamed, if we have a lot of projecting thoughts, a lot of upset, then in a way, we're our own enemy, isn't it?
Ta ta mejendo che nganzo nebashi sono okongi da nebashi kiti yise nganzo dijwa tsu yaro was.
If another person harms us, we say that person is my enemy. That person has harmed me and so forth, don't we?
Ta te noji tani so page ta shanda wo ngen da wo zogi do so danda wo zogi ta so
So whether we become our own best refuge, whether we become our own best friend, or whether we become an enemy or an opponent to ourselves, in a lot of ways, it depends upon us, doesn't it?
ta chendel chaja lila wo shena yo ko ya are ane ta page ta rimbol ta wa yena yo so dipele mo so tani che wa ina ta so danu ne da dishus cha pare so.
So of course, we Geshe gave an example looking at sort of our interactions of this lifetime. But if we look at our interactions in future lifetimes, for example, then it's our accumulation of unwholesome karma that will lead to future sufferings. And also in that way, we can be our own enemy or our own friend.
Pena zombolen de me ta wa yena ta manda na so ji wa was. Ta ri ji ge dipele so ne la ta ro je kanga page ki wo me ba so ne la ka chi chi yo are so za chimbo zhe yo are za chimbo no ne la na lo no wa de ta la ka chi.
So we see in the world, right, there are lots of people engaged in all types of actions. You know, we could say that some of them are unwholesome. And of course, whether we speak about ourselves or others, we can say that most of our activities are compelled by this wish for a true and lasting happiness. But most sentient beings, because they're confused about what the causes of happiness are, right, they can be compelled into negative activities.
Ta deshi te tenda page ta rimbol pai me ba zon to yo are so za chimbo no ta pe
So by seeking one's advantage through unwholesome negative activities, then one is kind of destroying the causes of one's future happiness. And if one is doing something like that, then we could say you are your own enemy.
Ta muri chi ti ta somba zombo we to ne se de se le yin ya ta page an ling wa ye se ge sha wa ani ka se te ye pe ge sha wa ya bo chen ro ki ri ji ya.
But there's another type of person, a person with a kind heart, and concordant with that kind heart, most of their activities of body, speech, and mind are aimed towards the happiness of others.
다 뒤에 소소소 자침부 써야 돼. 이내 자침부 써야 돼. 뭔가 따따 많은 거요.
And so that actually is a way of seeing oneself as important, having compassion for oneself, and following a path that is correct to actually take care of one's own welfare.
다 던지지 자 손지가 간절로 달라야 다니 다기 다니 다기 게요. 사다 자치부 인도 왔어.
So that's why the Buddha says one can be one's own enemy and one can be one's own refuge or friend. It is based on an understanding of that principle.
다 갖다는 시대 괜찮아 지어야 되는 된다 할 레벨 된다 친구도 왔어.
When you first see these words by the Buddha, you might kind of think it's a little bit weird, like what is being said. But if you think about them deeply, actually, you see that there's some quite evident meaning.
몸보지 하고 사는 가서 뭐 리시인 바스 간조 치료 다 지모지 여기에 걸어 아니 로지스 나타니 지산 반도비 갈라 키 걸어 빠치 좋아하는 자잔디.
Yeah. So Geshe was joking about a friend of his who has a teacher. So and this teacher took this advice literally. One is one's own refuge or one's own friend. So in the little sort of shrine that he kept in his room, he had a picture of himself because he was his own refuge, right? And people would ask him, like, what's up with that, having your own picture in the shrine? And he said, whatever outcome one experiences comes from one's own endeavors, right? Yeah, so actually we can't say that action was meaningless, because if you think about it in a certain way, actually there is meaning behind it. And when we speak of refuge, of course, we know that there are three objects of refuge: Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. But we know that it is the Dharma which is the actual refuge. And the Dharma is something that needs to be realized within one's own mind. Therefore, it is internal, not external. Yeah, so also we understand that all of these things are actualized by or with our mind. And the mind's capacity to transform is compared to quicksilver or mercury, which in ancient times was believed to be able to transform iron into gold. So the mind is like that. So based upon this human mind, and also connected with that is our human body, right? Because the body is also important. But this human mind then is like a quicksilver. It is this elixir which can transform all of the situations that we meet, even if they are like iron, and transform them into gold. So that's the capacity. But nothing's going to happen with that capacity or with that potential if we don't do something to activate it, right? So it's important to activate that capacity as well. So when we speak about these positive mental qualities, not just love, but great love, not just compassion, but great compassion, mahakaruna, right? And then the bodhicitta, which stems from these, it is establishing these qualities which will allow our mind to become transformative, like the quicksilver that transforms iron into gold. And when we do that, then all of our positive or wholesome activities of body, speech, and mind, however small they may be, because of the mindset that we have brought forth, even that smallest of virtues becomes a path to the supreme liberation.
다 자점 뭐죠 뭐 요아를 때는 꼭 깨지질 거 니밤에 와서 해야 다 만족 거까지 요아레스.
And this mind of bodhicitta, similarly, even the karmas, the unwholesome karmas that we have accumulated from countless beginningless lifetimes in samsara until the present, can instantaneously be completely purified with the arising of bodhicitta.
신주 첨부 요아를 와서 디빠또 첨부 가제 먹이 가제 이나요. 콜 니빠 먹이 기지데 좀바도 니지 싸와지고 전주 세대요. 어다고 니밤에 와서 더 그래.
In the Bodhisattva Charivatara, Shantideva explains that on one hand, right, even a very serious misdeed, a serious unwholesome karma, is not something that needs to be completely terrifying, because we know that it can be completely purified through arising positive mental qualities such as love and compassion.
어다 디세야 보세는 뭐지 소소소 고가를 주니 가세 더더기 보제. 어다 이게 자시 보시 자기 그렇게 어떻게 대래자 대비가라 어떻게 보면 나와요 아레스.
And so, of course, if we just put a little bit of effort into this, then as we go about our lives, the different activities we engage in, the people we meet, as we enjoy speaking with our friends, enjoy a cup of tea or coffee, and so forth, we can have some confidence, right, that we have created some virtue.
어다 조조들 당간조 강한 눈을 때는 리지고 전에 다 고만 유키든 리고 다 싸바든 무시그러 왔어. 무슬러이나 편바드바 만가 내와시면 뭐세도 여번 로기 somebody 세르냐자 다 강갈 같이 말해서.
So many of you will have heard this doubtless many times before, but in case there are people who are new, if we could sum up the essence or the foundation of this practice, it will be, I will do my best to bring benefit to others. And if I cannot benefit them, at least I will refrain from harm. If one is able to do just that, right, great things can come about. So we'll begin with a brief meditation to plant these positive seeds in the mind, because to plant those positive seeds in the mind, we need to prepare the earth or the soil. Letting go of any distracting thoughts that may be filling up your mental space. And bring forth a sky-like emptiness in the mind. Think that the body feels well and at ease, and the mind feels open, different than before. We tap into the nature of the mind, which is pure luminosity, clear and vast. The mind, like a mirror, which can reflect and can comprehend any object of knowledge, any dharma. Let us take this nature of the mind, which is so powerful, and bring it into the direction of what is positive, through kindness, through love and compassion.
모두 당도 스도 쓸었다가 이나요다 소소가 다니에 자 체조 무지 강가 자치 뭐지 마도 아니 근데 그 당연히 지지 정말
Any human, any animal, any sentient being that I meet, I feel close to them. I feel connected to them. There's not a single one I could point to and say that I am disconnected from, or that they are my enemy.
예 연비가를 가르친 거. 예 마연비가를 이나요. 다 된다. 소소마 통화소리마도 가르친 거 주주 선바지.
On the practical level, we know that when these various beings are close to us, they're kind to us. But even if we don't have close relationship, there are many who are kind, many who benefit us in unseen ways.
용지 스도 쓸이나 근데 손스테 때 그게 좋아서 내서나 아니 용기가 예기가 가디나 기보 차거든. 다 드네 용화지 선바지.
If I develop this feeling of closeness, of intimacy with others, then I will be able to experience myself, happiness myself, and I will be able to bring happiness to sentient beings. In order to be able to achieve that, just as I have aspired, as I have thought, I will make single-pointed requests to the holy beings for their blessings. Bai Chom Den De Jun She Ba Jai Chom Ba Yon Da Bar Zo Be Sang Ge Re Ba Dang Sha Su Dem Ba De War She Ba Ji Den Gem Ba Che Bu Du Be Ka Lo Gyur Wa La Na Me Ba La Na Min Hang Gi Tem Ba Sang Ge Chom Den De Be Ja Wa Sha Gya Tu Ba La Cha Ze Lo Che De Gya Be Su Chi Ho Tumba Chom Den De Jin Je Ba Da Chom Ba Yang Da Ba Zo Be Sang Je She Ba Dang Shap Su Den Ba
Dewa Sheba
Jite
Jite
Chemba
Jebu Dewe Galo Jorwa Lana Meba Lado Minamgi Tumba Songge Jomdende Ejawa Shakya Duba La Chonse Lo Chede Kyazu Ji Ho Tumba Jomdende Dejin Sheba Jajumba Yang Daba Zube Sanje Reba Dang Shatsu Demba Dewa Sheba Shiten Chemba Jeba Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Lada Minamgi Tumba Sangye Jomdende Bejawa Shagya Tuba La Chaze Lo Chede Kyatsu Chi Ho Mandala Soji Begi Joji Medo Jari Ra Lingji Nide Gen Pa Son Du Mede Muwayu Drogun Namada Shingra Jebarjo Idam Guru Ratna Mendala Koniryada Yami Refuge and Bodhicitta.
Sonje Jedo
Chedan Sogi
Dojo
Chenam
Jonam
La
La
Jangchu
Jongju
Baldu
Baldu
Dani
Dani
Gyabsu
Gyabsu
Ji
Dagi
Dagi
Chijen
Chijen
Jibe
Gibe
Zono
Sunam Gi Drola
Jidam
Benjir
Sonje
Sangye
Dropa
Dropar
Changu
Shu
Sonje Jedo
Chedan
Dojo
Sogi
Jonam
Chenam La Jangchu Baldu
Dani
Dani
Gyabsu
Gyabsu
Jo
Ji
Dagi
Dagi
Chijen
Chijen
Jibe
Gibe
Zono
Sunam Gi
Lola
Drola
Bejo
Benjir
Sonje
Sangye
Dropa
Dropar Shu
Sonje Jedo
Chedan
Dojo
Sogi
Jonam
Chenam Lai
Joje
Changshu
Baldo
Bardu Dani
Dani
Gyabsu
Gyabsu
Ji
Jo
Dagi
Dagi
Chenyen
Gibe
Gibe
Zono
Sunam Gi
Je
Drola
Dola
Benjir
Sonje
Sangye
Dropa
Dropar Shu
Oh yeah, that is was. Oh, that thing, that Tumane, the Nish to Kanosi, Diane, you the Susa de Joga. Because on shoot up watching, they are both
So as we first bring forth the motivation for the practice, conjoined with that are powerful minds of accumulation of wholesome karma and purification. This is something really important to keep in mind.
Oh, Tangaru, young Anson, yes, in it, Tamaton, God, the kids, so jaded, be leg, is that Susa de Juti, that they pay, be the watches of yours.
So one of the things that's blocking us from being able to see reality, from being able to see the truth of how things are the negative or unwholesome karmas that we have accumulated. Therefore, purification is very important.
Oh, that colony is with the Chandro to session, you get up, Ma, Senchela Tepidipa. You are Tanya Sunja to Sunja Sembala Tepidipa, Chipatons on talking to us.
So Refuge and Bodhicitta is a beautiful verse because it allows us to purify the two types of objects due to which we engage in activities that accumulate unwholesome karma. So on the one level, sentient beings, that's purified through bodhicitta, and then on the higher level, right, the Buddhas and so forth. And so this is purified by going for refuge. So also just to keep in mind when we talk about accumulation of what is positive or what is wholesome, just that awareness of others as being kind, just that awareness of feeling close to others, this is really going to allow one to generate a lot of wholesome karma, right? A lot of virtue. And so also to be able to cultivate those positive mental qualities, we need to take good care of ourselves. Because if we don't take care of our physical health or body, right, or our mental health, we need a body and a mind that are healthy to be able to bring forth those qualities.
아니 가침보지를 다 가디나 레세 리데워도 세키워요네 인디멘을 다 라바디지 손을 또 말했어. 저도지나. 야 이나요 다 안조 레 동보와든지 이나. 가디나 내온 저거만 판대온 저거만 돼서 뭐뭐 사대가 이나. 델라테네 다 셀로 노도 뭐뭐. 델라테네 리마데와 뭐죠.
So if we think about it starting with mental health, how do we experience a greater mental happiness? We can trace back a lot of our sort of upset that we experience is connected to our projecting thoughts, especially those projecting thoughts of dissatisfaction, right? And then due to that, one begins to feel more unhappy. And then connected with that unhappiness, sometimes we'll also experience more physical problems. Yeah, and so because we're so habituated, right, to kind of this striving, always wanting something better, this attitude of dissatisfaction is very much part of our psyche, part of our mind, mixed with it. So yeah. Let's ask if he what's difficult. No, I understood him perfect. I understood him perfectly, but it's a word that's kind of loaded these days, right? But Geshe was saying, in order to kind of change that mindset of dissatisfaction, it can take as little as 5 minutes or even 2 or 3 minutes. For people who are in situations like most of us, it involves reflecting on our privilege. When we look around the world at how many people are in really terrible situations, right? Then we will see that our situation is relatively fortunate by comparison.
And
whether one believes in Dharma or not, as a Buddhist or not, that recognition, right, that we are in a situation which is actually quite good when we look at many in the world. This is going to help us to be more open-minded. This is going to help us have greater physical and mental happiness. And if we're able to recognize the fortune or the privilege of our situation, that will allow us to, through appreciation of it, become more joyful.
And
sort of on a broader level, we can see that it is this attitude of dissatisfaction, of always striving for more for oneself or the people with one whom has affinity. This is what leads to so many problems in the world. So the wholesome and unwholesome qualities of our mind, it's a little bit like the factors of heat and cold in a room, right? When the feeling of heat rises, the feeling of coolness naturally declines. And when the feeling of coolness arises, then the feeling of heat naturally declines. So they have that kind of relationship.
새 버겐 좋아도 또때 새가 손승 가달라 되는 건 좋아 전부치 또 그거 마도 가와 손승 가와
So when with these unwholesome minds, or these minds that trouble us, it's that principle of heat and cold. The way to reduce those minds is to increase the factor that is their opposite or their antidote.
소츠 먼저와 변나 요바 존지 배도 요 말에 소츠 먼저와 요 비때니 자대 체망이네 요나 다 지디 매와서 돌려.
So just cultivating that antidote will bring maybe some benefit, but not the full benefit, because it's most powerful when we really understand the mind that is the antidote. And that can only come through a valid reasoning. So that valid reasoning is also really important.
컨트롤 숑베는 니밤에 와서 토그레 에서 컨트롤 콜라 컨트롤 숑바 코라니 손승 가와 임바 지바라 바스 이나 컨트롤 자대 체망 요.
So if we take anger and love, for example, we understand that they are kind of their opposites. So in this way, love will act as the opposing factor to anger. But then one might ask, well, isn't that a little bit deceptive? How do we know that love can really overcome anger? The reason for that is because anger is not a mind that is based on a valid reasoning, whereas love is.
다 숑발로 코 따짜메도 베트서 토요 말했더니 니밤에 와서 토야 돼 콜로 자대 체마지 요아래 손스만 말아 왔스카니.
So love cannot sort of clear away anger completely, but because it is a mind based on reason, which is its opposing factor, when we cultivate love, anger can be greatly reduced, almost dormant.
어다때 릴라월잖아 야산도 다 베트야 타와도 녀물잖아 요코다다다다 진도요아레스.
And so, this was an easy example, but also, for example, if we take liberation and the afflictions, that functions in a very similar way.
어다든지 진행한서 다스야 세를 그게 주다 테네기 보치는 거야.
So then we will proceed with a kind of this happy awareness that we are trying to train or cultivate the mind. So bring forth a positive motivation and then set the body and mind in a state of relaxation. So with an attitude of wonderment, like a very young child who walks into an ornate temple for the first time, just observe with open-mindedness the feelings, thoughts, and so forth arising connected with your body, speech, and mind. So that I, or the self, there's definitely a feeling, a presence of that self or I that arises. So go a little bit further and think, if I try to find that self or that I, am I able to do that? Is it findable? Is it pinpointable? If we look at our body and our speech as the first place we're seeking that I, it's pretty easy to come to the conclusion that the I isn't findable in either of those.
다 가시 잔이라 요는 세근 눈이 자이라 근데 세는 운시도 이시세니가 가가야서.
So if we discount body and speech, then we should say the I can only be findable within the mind. And then the mind is kind of divided into the various sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness. So is there an I that's findable in any of those?
가와자와 이나요 라야 메바질나 저 마리 바디 요아레 소노 돈냐라 테네파 소화 슈자보 노도 슈자보선 만족감이 깔까지.
So we'll see as we try to look for it, we cannot find it. But our ignorance deceives us, saying there is an I, there is a self that really exists. That can compel us into confusion and unwholesomeness.
우리 강가 던지 뚜만이 되면 시비 온게 거하고 된데 다 소소 던지 뚜바시니 다 용주 수지 살티도 가서
Think it is the lack of this understanding of the ultimate nature of things, of emptiness, that keeps myself and others circling within samsara, within cyclic existence. May I realize this emptiness, and may I guide others to that realization. So connected with that specific motivation, bring forth the wish of bodhicitta, enlightenment, to be able to lead others to enlightenment.
소만도시 땡땡저 토그제 대자 침보대요. 아니 센저롱지는 게사와 정말 강간 로보와레 다 땡땡 용거래.
If I dedicate myself to this, I can definitely achieve it. Why? Because I have the basis of achieving enlightenment within me, the pure luminosity of my mind, and the understanding that the defilements, the stains that obscure that are adventitious. They can be removed.
어떤 가로서 나서 자체 못 돼야 돼. 어떤 링아 이선은 따는 라야 문제 때문에 요는 요바시 워렌디 왔어.
So we just did this exercise where we tried to where we tried to locate this I or this self in the body, speech, and mind, but we weren't able to find it. But nominally, right, there is an I, there is a self.
다 단다 자된 누지. 때에 따바지 요하를 봐도 다 대서는 가제 자와 이나라야 문제.
So the thing is, though, it doesn't exist the way that we think it does. It's something that is only designated dependently, something that can only arise through causes and conditions.
단다 집어티 자티 두그레 대니 추발라 때네 자질레서 왔어. 자티 집어티 파쇼대요 말에 관이 받으니 가려 문제 왔어.
So just as kind of the gong and this mallet, right, when they meet each other, you hear this sound that is formed. The sound does not exist independently of the meeting of this gong and this mallet, right? And so the self is a little bit like that.
어다 된 누시 데릴라고 말다스. 나세다 간데시레 말 알레 쇼로바도 노발라 게자요 아래 나 누가 집어라요. 제가 뭐든 너 대비 선스지. 아니 세존바가 선스지. 아마로지비 선스지. 다른 바 뉴아스.
And this self, the actual way that it exists and how it functions, this is not such an easy thing to discern. We know that there are many different, systems of Indian philosophy and spirituality that posit the self in a different way than it is posited in Buddhism. And then even within Buddhism, we have many different ways of understanding how the self is arising according to the four schools of tenets, right? The Vaibhasikas, the Sautantrikas, and then the Chittamantrans, or the mind only, and then the two schools of middle way, or Majjhimika.
다 대지 용조 대 루지바 마치 세선바도 루지바 현다마 원도대와 용조가 핀봉아이 논에 고서 따사가 논에 지요 그거래 사우자데.
So all of those schools of philosophy, from the Vaibhashikas, the Sautantrikas, including the mind only and the first of the two middle way schools, the Sautantrika, they are holding that there is some basis of designation for the self, which must be findable within these five aggregates: form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness.
텔리라고 말다스. 디소서 때 가젤하데바 이는 셀라. 마리비가 보게 유치하데요.
And this is a problem because as long as there's some sort of conception that there is a findable self within those, then there will always be a trace of ignorance still remaining in the mind. So it's not easy, right, to purify or to get rid of that. And so then, as we mentioned, this motivation to achieve Buddhahood, enlightenment for all sentient beings, then we need to train in the practices of the three paths. And so then, in terms of the paths of the small scope and the middling scope, we didn't cover those extensively in terms of the lamp of the path, but we covered them at least briefly. So we are now in the stages of the great scope. And there's a text of the Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment by Lord Atiśa, right? This is a very precious text. We could say that it is the source of all of the Lamrim, the stages of the path, and all of the Lojong, the mind training teachings. Yeah. We could say that it is the essence of all of the teachings of the Buddha, and sort of more precisely, the essence of what is contained within all of the stages of the path texts composed by, for example, Lama Tsongkhapa, which are, many hundreds of pages long. Dola temba chiwaji pebaso. So when Atiśa so when Atiśa arrived in Tibet, it is said that the various disciples who he met there, they had sort of composed 4 questions to him based upon their own understandings of the sutras, of the collected discourses of the Buddha.
So the
first was about bodhicitta. Is bodhicitta something that can be arisen only in the mind of those who are already superior beings, or is it something that also ordinary beings are able to bring forth? And the answer to this, and you will have seen it was contained in the text, was that all types of sentient beings within samsara are able to newly arise bodhicitta, right? Not just superior beings. And the second doubt that they had was, in order to be able to receive the bodhisattva vows as a preliminary, is it necessary to have received the vows of the pratimoksha, the vows of individual liberation? So if you look at the literal words within the lamp of the path text, it would seem to indicate that receiving the pratimoksha or vows of individual liberation are a necessary preliminary for receiving the bodhisattva vows.
다 이나요 더 자와 콜리라고 요마를 고금이야 된다 친구 뭐요 아이자 대길 리라고 거터마이자 롱제요 거로고 조지지 조 말했어 롱제
랑준세나?
그러근요
But because this point was a little bit sticky or a little bit tricky, actually we can find more of the answer in the auto commentary that Atiśa composed to his own text, to the lamp of the path.
다 대도더니 다 된다 내가 현다가 놀라가 저 배장 뭐도라 요하래라 아니 다 소소 다비리 더 그세 그반다 버스마데 대야쇼텔 그제시 yes
The Rangjel Jo Jetsomsarwa.
yeah
And so in the auto commentary, it actually explains that it is said that the vows of individual liberation are the best basis for receiving the bodhisattva vows, not that they are the only basis.
유자 치고 가리나 롱제 잘라서나 좀 뭐 그러래
Yeah. So when we speak about a rangjel, an auto commentary, this is very important to understand because it's going to be more authoritative than other commentaries because it's a commentary that Atiśa himself composed based on the root text. Yeah.
배나 엄마 주바요 리라고 매아이자 고깔레 카워지 이자 빠디다와 저바 코로 룬데주 코로 줘요.
So for example, with the Mañjuśrī, the Umalajupa, or entering the middle way, this is also a text which has many difficult meanings. And to elucidate those meanings, then then Chandrakirti himself composed an auto commentary where he glossed the text.
대치 다 좋았음 봤대라.
Dondak dire sosutarbe domba gogyo. So I just wanted to say we need to make it clear for folks because I just know that folks would worry about this point. So the point is that it's best to receive the pratimoksha vows before receiving the bodhisattva vows, but it is not required. It is not a necessity. One can still receive them without that.
다 이나요 때 야청보르단 로 말마도 돈바시야 말레스 달라도 던질.
But an interesting thing is that we talked about the practice of bodhicitta, but the actual vows of bodhicitta, and we could also say the vows of individual liberation, these can only be received by human beings. They can't be received by other types of beings within samsara, even like the devas and so forth. So there's many, when we say that the human rebirth is precious, right? There are many, many reasons for saying that.
토발라 이니메드는 다신이거는 찌지보는 저거 이니메니까 그래.
So then the third question is regarding the actual achieving of supreme liberation. In other words, full Buddhahood. The practices of method and wisdom, is it necessary to practice both of those to completion, or could we practice only the method or only the wisdom side to get to enlightenment? So if we followed only wisdom, would we be able to become a Buddha through that? Or if we followed only method, would we be able to become a Buddha through that? And then the final one, Sangye Drubila Tawa Yaksha. And then the final one was in terms of the view. What is the ultimate view that one needs to realize in order to be able to become a Buddha? And so, some people say it's the Majjhimika view, the middle way view. Some people say it's the Chittamantra view, the mind-only view. And so we can come to a discussion about those later. So these are the 4 questions based upon the sutras that were asked that led to the composition of this text. Yeah, so that's what we are turning to now. So for those of you who are following in the English, I believe we're on page 8, verse 40.
su le gele sun bi ye la la le ne mi pa ku ri ji la yo yin ge la ja ba sha.
So, page 8, verse 40. Therefore, maintaining the requisites taught in the collection of Samadhi chapter, place your mind on any suitable virtuous object of focus.
我当年呢，等那些这几笔经验子，他现在这样给家的做些，等到经验子电波要不去搞个这。
So this is talking about single-pointed concentration, calm abiding, which means that we need to be able to develop a good single-pointed focus upon an object.
我他这卡哇伊呢，蛮子来东北干的，俺就卡的呢，你还点点卡清不了，我是真把电波用那，他们写了伊呢，卡的呢，给我去点点要。
And when we train in concentration, this is also going to help us in our daily life, because developing concentration requires us to be able to develop our mindfulness. And mindfulness, when it's developed, is something that's going to help us a lot in our daily tasks and interactions.
我他等的我去我要，他等到等我这个的话，我他是米八给米八，要不去了要的，那努力个国家都得是话。
So the way to kind of really open the successful meditation is through developing the jewel-like concentration, which allows one's mind to focus single-pointedly upon its chosen object.
而且都蛮多人那里苦啊人那里，他说个他年人那里死了人那样，米八岁那样，应该是这头远的，这都现在这头远是远的。
So actually, this type of samadhi can be developed using any object of focus. For example, the image of a person close to you, the image of a house, the image of a flower, and so forth. Any type of object can be used.
我做米八不给下的，我写了他恐怕要把去等到做够远。
So we want an object of meditation that we're familiar with and an object that is easy to dawn or arise within the mind.
我他看中俺们俺就这些差异吧，我他没去这个，还是出去这个。
Zio.
我这往这边干了，可我家这个月，看这电视上盯着这个月嘛的，那姨妈那么早起不去了，给这真的了。我他除了这个热哇是，把这个热了。
So there's the story of the shepherd who was trying to develop samadhi, develop his concentration in meditation, and he was always unsuccessful. And a great Lama said to him, you know, the problem is that you're using objects that you are unfamiliar with. So as a shepherd, imagine the sheep's horn or the cow's horn and meditate upon that. Sorry, it was a goat's horn. So because he saw the goats all the time and their little horns, and he was very familiar with it. So when he took that as his object of meditation, he was able to achieve concentration very easily. But generally, it's said that if one is able, it's recommended to take a virtuous object, such as an image of the Buddha or Tara or any other enlightened being that you feel an affinity with. And also, a really important thing is staring at the object for a long time. That's not concentration meditation, right? We can use the object as a support, but we need to bring forth the image within our mind. That's the actual object of focus. Verse 41, when the practitioner achieves shamatha, so that's calm abiding, higher knowledges are also attained, but without the practice of the perfection of wisdom, the obscurations will not be eliminated.
Yeah.
So this is saying that, you know, we can achieve some things just through concentrations, through shamatha alone, but without the union of shamatha and vipassana, right, calm abiding and special insight, we won't be able to clear away the obscurations completely. Verse 42. Therefore, in order to abandon without exception all emotional and cognitive obscurations, constantly meditate on the practice of the perfection of wisdom with skillful means. So just to purify the obscurations. How is it? I'm sorry, I can't even remember who translated it now, but the translation is a little gonda.
말말 제타다 이르미 단다 라보시 되거라. Yeah.
Yeah, so emotional and cognitive obscurations. We generally talk about the knowledge obscurations and the obscurations to omniscience. That's the vocabulary.
제도 계속 이제 말다. 미 라보시 되거라.
that's
아직 니모 봐도 시리즈와 용조 봉하라.
Yeah.
타도 집이가 다 시라라 되네.
Yeah.
아니 타도 시라니까 농도가.
Yeah.
아니 자수 좀 와서 더 그래.
So it's on the basis of the combined practice of both method and wisdom that we will be able to purify completely both the knowledge and the afflictive obscurations. So I guess emotional obscurations is how he's translating the obscurations of the afflictions, and cognitive obscurations is how he's translating the obscurations to knowledge or obscurations to omniscience.
어다 내가 그 야채모지 하다 딜라고 말했어. 배나 또 많이 가제 거자가 있는 녀몸에 와서 토기도 마도 녀몸이 잡에 받자도 좀 와서 토기야.
So the paradox here is, as powerful as emptiness is, no matter how much we meditate on it, it will only be able to get rid of the afflictive obscurations. It will not be able to get rid of the imprints left behind by the afflictions, which we know as the knowledge obscurations.
다 콜로로바 셴바 쳔보 니지 쳔보 다 하고서와 세제 간가 이더고 자 쳔보 투키더니 자와 집에 손주지 세들레소나 녀몸이 잡에 받자야 되거든요. 르베르베 동안전.
But if that emptiness is conjoined with a practice of love, compassion, seeing beings with affection, and especially bodhicitta, then when that infuses our meditation on emptiness, both the afflictive and knowledge obscurations can be cleared away. So that's an important point. Verse 43, wisdom without skillful means and skillful means without wisdom are said to be a form of bondage. Therefore, do not relinquish either one. So we explained that already, actually, just reiterating. 44. To eliminate doubts concerning what is wisdom and what are skillful means, I shall clarify the correct distinction. So skillful means here means method. Between skillful means, between method and wisdom. So Atiśa is saying, what is method or skillful means and what is wisdom? I'm going to explain a little bit about that. 45, with the exception of the perfection of wisdom, the accumulations of all virtuous actions, such as the perfections of generosity and so forth, are described as method, as skillful means by the victorious ones. So this is quite easy to understand when we speak about emptiness, whether the subtle or coarser forms of emptiness. This is classified as wisdom. And then when we speak about all of the other perfections, whether we talk about ethics, concentration, wisdom, patience, and joyous effort, those are all included within the method or skillful means aspect of the path. So 46, whosoever cultivates wisdom through the power of cultivating skillful means will swiftly attain enlightenment, but not through meditation on selflessness alone. So if one has the method practices as the assisting factor along with the practice of wisdom, then one will be able to achieve enlightenment, but not through wisdom, not through meditation on selflessness or emptiness alone.
당원아 시라세아트 근데 같이 뭐지는 시라세아트 유가르레스 되니 좋아지.
So now the next question that might arise is, well, when we talk about wisdom, what is that wisdom? What's the actual object that we're trying to understand or meditate on? So that brings us to verse 47.
핀보코도 시제노 시와메바 또제비 롱지도니 시바는 시라지는 용스시.
What we call wisdom is thoroughly explained as an understanding of the emptiness of inherent existence, the realization that the aggregates, elements, and sense sources are unproduced.
당가로서 다 배제 또 대한민국 돈 대하서 돈도 마도 내서 뭐 하러 왔어. 안저 진내서 뭐 하러 와.
Yeah.
치유서 조바데 근본가 봄조지 시제진년을 로비와.
So our eyes are perceiving all different types of kind of phenomena. And what Geshe is explaining is that all of the phenomena that we're seeing can be categorized as into one of these three categories of aggregates, elements, and sense sources.
다 빈본가 듣게자 뭐지 사이바 수지 빈본 저희 빈본 드시지 빈본 드셔지 빈본 농바시 빈본.
And when we speak about the aggregates, we've gone through these many times: form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness.
드니 컴텔 컴자 코치도 할래비 뭐시 요한테 릴라보시나 코
And when we speak about the elements, right, there are actually very long lists of the elements, but the shortest one gives them as 18.
미빠 연주 코트. 여임바 코트.
Yeah, so the 6 associated with the object of focus.
때 umbi 코트.
And the 6 associated with the basis or the power.
아니 땜바 노시지 코트. 노시그 코트.
Namjin.
노시 노마시바.
And the 6 associated with consciousness. So those are the 18 elements. Wangbo. Yeah, and then the 12 sense sources. And so when we think about those, we can talk about 6 internal ones and 6 external ones. Oh, and so the outer ones, they're easy. These are younger forms, sounds, tactile objects, tastes, smells, and so forth. And phenomena. And so all things can also be included in that category in terms of the external. And the internal 6 are the sense factors that are the sense consciousnesses or sense powers that are processing those. So the eye consciousness, nose consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, and so forth. So because all phenomena can be included in these 3, right? A wisdom that is an understanding that all of these are empty of inherent existence is what we call wisdom. And this wisdom is what can lead us to be able to extinguish completely all of the afflictions and be able to lead us to the supreme state of liberation. And so do we have to realize this for each of these phenomena individually? That's another question that arises. So the secret is, if we understand the lack of inherent existence, the emptiness of inherent existence of the self, then it will be easy to carry through that understanding to all other phenomena as well.
아까서라와 아니 소노 또 nenga마 노지칼레션 달 그거야 말이야. 안저 소노 또 와서지 다시 릴라워진 하고도 그래.
So one doesn't need to kind of exert oneself through many reasonings and really push to get that understanding of emptiness that one did for the I. One will easily, without having to put much effort, be able to realize that emptiness of inherent existence of other phenomena, right? It carries forward.
저체 가르래. 로지 매바 강가 찌바래 돼요. 와스. 로지 저바 요는 강가 찌바래 돼요. 와스.
So what's the reason for this? The misconception of all objects as existing inherently or from their own side is the same misconception. And that same misconception about all of those objects can be overcome by that same by the same understanding, the understanding that they are empty of inherent existence. So it's not like you have to go through an individual process of discerning this for every single phenomena in the universe, right? So number 48 is dealing with if we want to understand emptiness, right? What are some of the logic or reasonings that are proposed for emptiness? Logimbe. So verse number 48, logically, something existent cannot be produced, nor can something non-existent like a sky flower. Consequently, as both faults would apply, something which is both could likewise not come into being. So there is a kind of really sophisticated presentation related to this with very specific terminology, but we will do an easier explanation today and maybe come back to it. Younger Sundang, Drebu? So this is a question about whether there is an inherently existent cause or an inherently existent result. Ale. Yabo como son gonda saben di
매도 마따그로 사베
saben.
사베 따비깔 매도 요마로와
Ale loso.
아그서로 어떤 이자 매도때 사베 덤보 따비깔라 우지지도 요마.
So when we plant the seed of the apple or when we plant the seed of the flower, we cannot see that flower or we cannot see that apple. Therefore, we know konda nganso seta pikabula metok dang kushu tongmi tubne dela tene konso rangshin gidrupa mares kogite. And because of that, when we are planting that seed, we can see that there is no inherently existent flower or apple. So one school of philosophy says that within the apple seed or within the flower seed, the apple or the flower is already there.
That
they're there, it's just that they're existing within the seed as a more minute potential. But if there was no apple or flower within the seed, you wouldn't be able to have an apple tree blooming from the seed, for example. So what we would say in our philosophy is that within that seed, there's not a flower or there's not an apple. There's a potential. There's a potential for an apple or a potential for a flower. And so thinking about this will help us to see, right, how the thing does not exist from its own side.
Nipa mebachi sabasha ndiuke chamares.
Chik mepa latene.
Nipa mebachi.
Yeah.
Nipa meba kor sabasha ndiu mares.
So
medu
go thompson many drama. Mepa kare.
매도 얘는 매도 시 사백이니까 니바 지워 걸어왔어.
Nupa.
니바면 매도 시가 말아와 들어가서.
Yeah, yeah.
근데
But
대가리
this, within the seed of the apple seed or the flower seed, there has to be a potential, right, for an apple or a flower. Otherwise, they would not be able to arise.
니바치는 뭐가 그 들어가서 시와요서는 너게 매도 지워 요자라.
Because if there didn't have to be a potential for the flower or the apple within the seed and they could just grow without that potential, then we would be able to have flowers that are just blooming in the sky. So that's what's meant by sky flower.
단지 오늘 내가 버려 소소 버스도 봐서 그때 왔어. 다 리라 진짜 그런 걸 가서 괜찮아. 다 된다 리버 루지 매바지 개체시 시바래. 에티가라.
Yeah, so this is showing that results are not truly existent, are not inherently existent. So now we're going to the verse more dealing with the cause, how the cause itself is not inherently existent. An entity is not produced from itself, nor from something else, nor from both, nor without causes. Therefore, it has no inherent nature.
Yeah.
So when we speak about the flower and the seed from which it grew, we can say that the flower arose dependently from the seed, but we cannot say that the seed and the flower are of the same essence or of one essence. Sorry. So there is no inherently existent flower or a seed arising as the same essence. There is no flower or seed arising from another essence. There is no inherently existent a flower or seed arising from from the same essence or entity or separate entities. And there is no inherently existent flower from the same essence. Yeah. So we have to come to a longer explanation of that. So these two verses are really dealing with whether there is an inherently existent cause or not, whether there is an inherently existent result or not, and whether there is one entity or separate entities. So verse number 50. And so this is talking about the essence of phenomena. So last time we talked about if the five aggregates if the self and the aggregates are one, either they have to be there has to be one inherently existent thing or multiple inherently existent things. Alternatively, when you analyze any phenomenon as to whether it is singular or multiple, no inherent nature is observed. Phenomena are thus determined to have no nature.
아니 우선 저는 군반도는 롱보치 요바이나
Mhm.
요나 롱보치 지 요바지 요가래 요나 롱보치 니 임반다고 지 요가라 왔어.
So to use an easy example, if we were to say that there is an elephant inside this room, there would only be two possible things. There would be a single elephant or multiple elephants.
된 노지 디리바 되가 로지 잡아 가시 요바이나
Mhm.
요나 로지 집이지 요나 로지 집이 담아 다 되지 요가.
So when we speak about something inherently existent, either we can speak of one singular inherently existent thing or multiple inherently existent things.
고자도 빈번히 로지 잡아지 저는 지용 로삼만도 지용나 내지 내가 먹어도 되지도 마셔. 아니 다대 이나요 내가 먹어도 대이자 로지 잡아 지용 로삼만도 다대 로삼만도.
So if we say that there is a self, an existent self that arises based upon the aggregates, 양결승동?
고자도 빈번히 로지 집이 지이나요 내가 먹어도 로지 집이 다대 이나요 내가 먹어요.
So if we say that they the self and the aggregates arise as a single inherent existent entity, there are many kind of flaws in that reasoning. Or if we say that they arise as multiple inherently existent entities, there are flaws in that reasoning. And so because there are neither of those, then there is nothing inherently existent. There is no inherent nature that can be observed. Yes, so lots to more to explore there. Yeah. The reasoning in the 70 verses on emptiness, the root verses on the middle way, and so forth, explain how it is proven that the nature of all things is emptiness. So that's the reasoning being summed up in the root of the middle way in the 70 verses on emptiness is that things lack, right, an inherent existence, and hence they are in the nature of emptiness. As this text would become too long, I have not elaborated further here. In order to facilitate your meditation, I will fully explain only the established conclusion. So when we speak about the lack of inherent existence, right, the most important thing to understand is that the reasonings are something that are to bring forth an understanding in meditation, right? That's the important thing. Thus, any meditation on selflessness in which you do not observe the inherent nature of any phenomena without exception is, in and of itself, the cultivation of wisdom.
Shira tumani go senamasena tenda tomo hatakata ina medo te tar mo tan ko dudun rawo tong ngo was.
So if we So if we look at a bush or sort of a bush of flowers from a very long distance, it might seem like a solid sphere at first.
But
as we draw closer to that bush and we see the individual leaves and twigs and so forth, we'll only be able to point to the parts, and that unified whole thing that we saw at first will seem to dissolve. So we can sort of use that external object, for example, the bush, which with its branches and leaves, to break it down into its parts and see that lack of findability. Or we can think of our own body, of the various organs and components of it, break those down and meditate on a lack of findability. And it's not something that we can set aside just after 2 or 3 days of meditating, right? This is something that we will need to kind of bring forth again and again.
This one, what are the power so to yoga go jatalele and roche gonjugonigton.
So using both analytical and placement meditation, first familiarizing ourselves with the reasonings related to emptiness, and then meditating on the understanding that we bring forth.
Oh, Tintibachi. Shirachi Nagacha Majibarwa. Shirachi Chinoka Kungi Roja Matoshi, Shira Tini Riche, but not Omeba. De Gosha.
So just as wisdom sees no inherent nature in any phenomena whatsoever, let wisdom itself be subject to analysis and meditate free from conceptuality.
Oh, that Dua, that Angela Banuji Roji Meba, Pegaro Guanella, Noto Maribase de Tapa, Tomazoya, and a watch.
So this lack of inherent existence is already going to be able to clear away false conceptions.
Yes, one?
Yeah.
Tangazangapa. Noto Lishi Sipanda, Nomba to be Dani, Tish, Male to Pumba, Yangen di Pachuino.
The nature of this existence, which arises from conceptuality, is conceptuality. Therefore, to abandon conceptuality in its entirety is supreme nirvana.
Oh, Tandeti, no, Lila Maraba, Tanganzo, Hoy, Yoda, Cheju Kandi, Gino. So all of
the problems that we experience within samsara, whether big or small, they all arise from this root of the ignorance grasping at the self.
This one, oh, that Tendiji is that Tendiga no to the part, which maybe so not to the Chikasuna. Or that Yangen di Bacho, Tava Yashute, Chitobare.
So if we're able to undermine that misconception that things exist inherently from their own side, once that is uprooted, then we will be able to achieve supreme nirvana, liberation.
Yeah, so
that's what's meant. Yep, that's what's meant by nirvana. So there's two ways to understand nirvana, which we could translate as liberation. One way is to understand it as liberation from suffering, and the other is to understand it as liberation from affliction.
Yeah.
And there's within the 4 seals of Dharma, the final one says that nirvana is peace.
That's Kunter, Consuli Jodende.
Yeah.
Machimaruba.
Yeah.
Teta Jodendeji, Noto Marie Chamber de Koi Jaso Tuashe, Tome Tinzela Neba, Nonkajata Tome Sal, Shisuso.
So Geshe said that this is a quote. It's showing the source in the teachings of the Buddha. So verse 56, accordingly, the Blessed One said, the great ignorance of conceptuality plunges us into the ocean of samsara. Resting in non-conceptual samadhi, non-conceptuality is as clear as the sky.
Oh, Terry, Aningaruso ta koala seneta, ta Kajamo, she date. So
what keeps us circling and circling in the cyclic existence or samsara is this ignorance grasping at the self.
This one? What? Tell Tani Tari Tumbani Roji Meba, Noka Nojita Sonotone, Maripa the Sajere Mataje, Karamagikara, Damanda Gojaba Ina, Mazomares.
And the only way to rid ourselves of this is the meditation upon the sky-like emptiness. Single-pointed concentration on that is the only remedy.
This Nomba Matu Palin Jupi Zulichon, Tochin de la Jaise, Nomba Matu Sojana, Noto Deca, non dete, Renji Matu Tobanjo.
Similarly, the dharani of entering non-conceptuality, if the heirs of the victorious ones contemplate without concepts this noble dharma, they will transcend conceptuality so hard to overcome, and eventually attain the state of non-conceptuality.
Oh, no to Mari Basa de Lila to Mares, Ina Renji, Kona Taniko Kalipito.
So conceptuality, when we talk about a mistaken conceptuality rooted in ignorance, this is something that is very difficult to completely get rid of. But if we train in stages, we will eventually be able to come to a state beyond it.
다 던지게 다 너희가 차송아 누두들 디디트 유도와.
Yeah. And so this is contained, that teaching is contained within that Dharani Sutra.
류도 리바타게는 신호 도제 시에메비 로제메바 녜시니 nomba tome gomba sha.
Verse 58, after gaining certainty from scriptures and reasoning that all phenomena are unproduced and without inherent nature, meditate without conceptuality.
다담 루치 바렌도와 마징와 그바테다 데니 고시니 렌지 테소 토시니 라갈라소 톤제테 순지숑주 예머리.
59, accordingly, from meditating on suchness, eventually you will attain heat and other signs. Supreme joy and the other bhumis will be attained, and Buddhahood, the enlightened state, will not be far away.
다 템보 치네 당길라바노 로지메바데 고자는 로기나. 아니 갈레 풀로토 데니 졸로테
Yeah. So these are actually names of the various bhumis, the various stages. And so yeah. So the first stage of the path of preparation. So there's 4 stages of the path of preparation. And so when you come to the Sumpa Tsarna, Sumpa. Yeah.
Raga laso tonjite.
Raga jola meyeres.
Raga se satombone res.
Satambone. Ine langagidang la kawayeres.
Tolo.
Tonglam. You come to supreme joy, which is the first bhumi on the path of seeing.
This way. Sulo do joloni la sulo la sum. Jolo la shi.
So these bhumis, there are 3 on the path of preparation, 4, on the path of accumulation, 4 on the path of preparation. And then 10 within the 2 paths of the path of seeing and the path of meditation. And it is those 10, Tonglam, Dang, Gomlam, and it is those 10 that are elucidated in entering the middle way. And so as one goes through those stages, then gradually one will be able to reach the state of supreme enlightenment. Yeah, so this is as explained in the sutras. And so as we come to verse 60 and forward, these are answers to questions that were posed related to Tantra. So in order to enter Tantra, then what are the prerequisites that one requires? Yeah. And having achieved the prerequisites, then to achieve realization in secret mantra, does one need to take a wisdom mother, a consort, or not? And then the third question is, because monastics, monks, and nuns cannot take a consort, are they able to achieve the realizations of secret mantra or not?
Yeah, so
Geshe is going to give the sort of the basic meaning of these few verses and then just read through the verses. So in terms of the prerequisites for entering secret mantra, then these have been explained many times as training in definite emergence, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness. The second thing one needs to do is to rely upon an appropriate spiritual teacher, and then finally receive a tantric empowerment, abhisheka. So there is a mistaken understanding that within the four empowerments, that to really receive the fourth empowerment, one actually needs to embrace a wisdom mother, a consort. And this is a mistaken understanding.
ngāga nipa tā tsē lōngā chī kōrō pake tā tsē tōba lé sō na o rima tē chukura mā tō tā rima tsē tōba mā lé bāta rewa yō mā rēs.
And also an understanding that as a beginner on the Vajrayana path, there's no question about it being appropriate to take on a consort, that this practice is something that is only for those practitioners on the very final advanced stages.
o tā sē dō lū dō tā tani ka peke nē tsā lō rōng chēmbō tō sā kē chī mē na tā tēndā rima tē chukura yō mā rē kāndā.
So when one has extremely refined control over the very subtle winds and minds, then one can perhaps think of taking on a wisdom mother. But before that, there is absolutely no question.
pēnā ngā zū gōsā gōsā rā shidū chīndu wās, o tā tēndā wā chī pē chāngā chukura yō rē. sō 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 nō tō yī nipa lā tēnā, lū ka nipa lā tēnā, ndē lōma chā sō tē sā lā nā sō.
Yeah.
Tā kā rō lōma chā sō tē, yō mē bā kōrō tā kā rō yō tō na, tā nipa tsē tō wā rā sī kā rēs.
So Geshe said that for those who are wondering, well, maybe I am pretty advanced and I can take a consort. How do I know that? The instruction is that if based upon, and this is really doing it, he said, not imagining. If based upon your extremely subtle winds, you are able to make all the leaves of a tree fall off, and then manipulating those same winds, reattach all of the leaves that had fallen back onto the tree, then you are at a level to do this practice. Otherwise not.
o tā sēnchē tēmba kē sēnchē yī na sēnchē shīwū jā chō mō bō sā lō mā
Shoo.
Sure.
Yeah.
shēndō chā tsā wā chē.
Yeah.
Tā kā rō yā jā tō yō na, sēmbō.
Yeah. Similarly, if you are able through the power of your mind and wind to cause a flock of birds to fall out of the sky and die, and then through the same power of your mind to restore life to each of those individual birds so that the flock is again flying in the sky, you are ready to do this practice. Otherwise not.
o tā tē dūnyā mō mō bō yō rēs, tā chē sō tō tē lāma kāshik jū lē nī rā.
So there's a lot of stories related to this and also related to various masters who may have gone down the wrong path, but, not time to tell all of those.
o tā yī mā shē chū wā rē.
Maybe another time.
tā mā, ndē kē tī wā, tā rā tē shū wā lā tēne ngā kā kā yō rē, kō kā yō rēs, ngā kā kō rā pā ngō jā tō kā kā yō rē tēne, yī nī mē jā, rī mā tē sē tā tāngi lā bā nō jī tsē tō wī kē chā rēs.
So the short answer here is that monks and nuns can absolutely enter the path of Tantra, because actually from the beginning stages, receiving the four empowerments, engaging in generation stage and visualization, working with the winds and completion stage, actually these do not require a consort.
o tā ālēn tī bā chā mā lū jā kīs.
So Geshe is just going to finish reading the text so that there's like a complete oral transmission. There's just a page left, but I'm not going to translate it because we want to leave time for question and answer. So he's just reading page 11 basically.
ngā tō nī lē chā bā yé shē tō jī lā sō nō jē chā pō mbā sō chā lā sō bā chā jē jē sō tō jī jī wā dē bā yī nā shōng jī tsō ngō sō tsō bā dē bā tō wā shā wā shē sō jī sō yé bē kā tē sō ngā shē dē nā mā tē lō yōng kā jī nyē kā bā rā jī sō jī wā tō wā kā chā wā lā sō tō jī lā mā tōng bā nyē bā shā lā mā nyē bā jī bā yōng tsō lō bē ngō kā yé sī kā dā nyōng dā dā nyē nā wā ngē chā wā chī bē kā tē bē chā wā tō mā sō jī jī chē lē rā tā bē bē kā bē sō ngā shī rā ngō kā nā tsōng bā shē bē lō mā shā kā tē ngō kā tē nzā nā tsō shē kā tā lā nē bē kā wā jī bā jī Kata doma tenyo te tuju che de bomba yi tuwa tano ju jo je teno nge so nge tu ye chaba yu na ye mai ji ka nye to che ba to ji se che je so she ba lo ben wo ge nye je teni ri la nye ba me ni de ma men je ba ji do su chi le she tong shong ju ge je se da ne shong ju lo xian do di xi shong ju lo je de ma lo be qian bo ma be ma men je yi xi jian zai wa zu so ja ga je qian bo teni xi je lo za ba gen lo lo ji ji xie de la ba ba 现在呢，小区给推略最拉可能在把我重新。
乐死，yeah. So that completes the text of the Lamp of the Path by Lord Atiśa. So Geshe reading the title of the text at the beginning, the homage and the oath to compose in order to establish auspicious tengel.
So Geshe
said we've covered, many of the important aspects of the Lamp of the Path. He doesn't feel comfortable in his mind to say that we've done a full scrutinizing study of it, so it definitely could appear again in the future. But the nice thing is that as we are moving through these various texts, right, we'll pick up where we left off in the oral transmission of Mañjuśrī text, and then this will cover in depth, right, all of the topics that are in this text as well. And also to understand that we have different texts in this series. For example, the stages of meditation. We shouldn't see these texts as separate entities, but things that are interwoven. So for example, in stages of meditation, it gives a lot of very precise instructions on shamatha and vipassana, which we saw were mentioned in this text here. Yeah. So whether we speak about the words of my perfect teacher, whether we speak about the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, whether we speak about the oral transmission of Mañjuśrī, whether we speak about stages of meditation, we need to understand that all of the topics of those texts are topics that are contained within Lamp of the Path. There is nothing other than that. Yeah. So Geshe said that one of the things that it sort of touches on, but not explicitly, it kind of hints at, are the 5 reasonings related to emptiness. So he would like to share that with you. Kedrup needs help with the more difficult topics. So Geshe and I will prepare those 5 reasonings together, and then we'll present them to you. It's like we did it before, but I'm like, yeah, but if it's like 5 years ago, Kedrup's not going to remember, right? That's the problem. Geshe remembers, so it's a bit different, right? Okay. So we will, so we will get to a presentation of that for you. So with a happy mind, let us concisely dedicate the merits. Rinpoche, Maje, Panam, Chejurji, Chewa, Nyamba, Mebayang, Gone, Gonda, Belwa, Risho, Tongi, Tawa, Rinpoche, Maje, Panam, Chejurji, Chewa, Nyamba, Mebayang, Gone, Gonda, Belwa, Risho. Jambe Bao Jidar Kyamba Dang Gunda Zambo Deyon Deja De Deda Gunje Jesu Dalo Jir Gewa Dida Tonje Radungo Dizun Shebe Gyawa Tamje Gi Ngawa Gangla Jodo Ngawa De Dagi Gewe Zawa Dikun Jong Zambo Joshi Radungo. Through the merits accumulated by myself and others, may all sentient beings be able to bring forth the mind that is the root of all happiness and good, the mind of loving kindness. With this mind of loving kindness, one is able to abide more happily within samsara. one is also able to draw closer to liberation from suffering and to complete enlightenment. So through this positive karma, may all causes of suffering be completely dispelled for all sentient beings, and may the sun of happiness shine on all beings without differentiation. And may, as one wishes oneself, become a cause for actualizing that. So we'll pause there. Just let me turn up the volume and we can take questions. All right, folks, please go ahead. Dave, I think I saw a couple of texts come up, so maybe we could start with those unless anyone live has a question.
Steve and Robert had questions, and I have a question.
Well, okay, I think I saw Steve's question pop up first, so let's do that, and then we can come to Emily, and then we'll go to Robert. Can you read me Steve's question, Dave?
Should I?
Yeah,
found
can you
it,
read
Dave?
it, Manoshi? I'm not hearing
Yeah, I
you.
can read it. Okay. Where could memories be said to exist? Are they within one of the skandhas?
Nganso Drempa seria di kawashogires, nganguma di chunso nguma sachi la joyens. Konso kawa yores, pumbo nga chik nangla yorides.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So they would be within the skandha or the aggregate of discrimination. So mainly they would be within the factor of discrimination, but also within consciousness. Yeah. So that's it. that's the answer. So memory are not connected to the, for example, 5 sense consciousnesses. They're not stored within those. Because these sense consciousnesses don't have the power to remember anything, right? So memory is something that has to happen within the mental consciousness. Yeah. But the eye consciousness sort of seeing something, remembering it, and then kind of activating an image of that within the mind. When that happens, especially repeatedly, slowly a memory is formed. So memory is quite important, and especially when we speak about meditation of calm abiding, right? Because our memory is what is going to allow us to arise the image of the object in our mind. So without memory, we won't be able to do that. So I think that covers Steve's question. Did you want to go ahead, Emily?
Robert,
sorry, he's not finished. Sorry. Younger Sundang. Yeah. So memory is a conceptual mind. And because of the sort of heaviness or strength of a conceptual mind, it's not something that can arise within a sense consciousness. Sorry, Emily, go ahead.
Robert asked first.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, we can ask his
Okay.
question
Please
first, but
say.
someone has to read it for me. I can't hear Dave at all today for some reason.
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was checking with Robert if he was interested to ask this question again. I guess I'll ask on his behalf. He was asking about can you say that part about inherent emptiness of the inherent emptiness of existence again? But I think perhaps he had.
I think inherent emptiness of existence, he means emptiness of inherent existence.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which part? Because like we talked about it a lot today.
Yes, I guess let's see. That's why, because you did elaborate afterwards. So I wondered if the question was still.
Yeah. So Robert,
Still there.
maybe ask back. We'll take Emily's question, then maybe ask back and clarify if you'd like.
Okay. I have,
Yeah.
they're not very long questions. We were talking about skillful means and method, and I was wondering if that's habits. I've heard that, mental illness and depression can be overcome by actions and habits. And my second part is, what is a consort?
So, okay. So just to clarify, Emily, when I said skillful means and methods, it's actually talking about the same thing. It's just the translator of this text translated the Tibetan word tap as skillful means, which is very unusual. I mean, I'm sure he had a reason because he's a good translator, but it's usually translated as method. So we're talking about the same thing, but I'll ask your
skillful
question.
means equals method on my notes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure I had told you guys that. Okay. So you want to know if this can get rid of mental illness, right?
Yes, and if it's habits weren't mentioned.
Right.
And I just wondered how, I guess you could talk about how actions and habits are important to relieving mental illness.
Mepa kandes dapo chiksogre tene tap seria de la tene mepa so tugirebe sine tap ginangola nganso gomshi kola keche shemasmos mi mambuchi gomshi gyurwatane de la tene sem yarge droe chigures di kande chigresa.
Yeah, that ya demare gare tanga me tayo marimo tangi tangi la ya was inden maso jojo sono tone koshi la tene.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's definitely true in terms of habits, and Geshe said that he's not an expert in terms of like Western psychology, but his understanding would be that when we engage in a harmful thought or behavior again and again, for example, dissatisfaction, when we engage in thinking in a dissatisfied way again and again and again, we place a deep imprint for that dissatisfaction within the mind, and this can lead to unhappiness. So it's our habituation to dissatisfaction, which can lead to a mental imbalance. So according to the spiritual principles, then we all have habituations, and habituations arise from habits, from engaging with something again and again and again. So if we can change our habituation by shifting our focus from a focus on what is unwholesome to a focus on what is wholesome, then we can develop more positive happiness, and this can have a good impact on our mental health. So it's like establishing an internal dialogue with yourself. So instead of being continuously down on yourself and dissatisfied, it's thinking about a different perspective, right? Maybe thinking about other beings in really terrible situations and thinking, you know, my situation may not have been as bad as I thought it was. And then developing a measure of contentment with one situation. That would be a way to kind of shift that habituation.
내가 매주 어주자요. 생각이 오게텔라.
Yeah.
가제도 코로다 그가 계속는 마토네 대한다고. 뭐다 개발라 되는 좀 매진게.
And so, you know, each person's going to be different in terms of what kind of method or skillful means is going to help them. But it could be, for example, just learning how to quiet the mind instead of tightly obsessing, because that can lead to a lot of imbalance as well. So just learning to empty the mind and maybe focus on something like the breath, that can be really helpful. Or we can try to kind of explore different ways of thinking.
그러긴 내가 그 뜨기 내가 가르쳐간도 기존의 바타 개발은 바티야도.
Yeah. So first, we really have to identify what the problem is, and we might need help doing that. But if we're able to identify what the problem is, then we'll have a much better idea of what method we can try to reduce that problem. Yeah, because sometimes what we can see, like there might be one sort of antidote that sounds kind of really appealing, but it's not the right antidote for us. So then we kind of like push ourselves, and then we just end up feeling stressed and thinking this stuff doesn't work at all, right? And that's not good. So it's like if you have a person that you really dislike, right? And you meet that person, and then you say, okay, I'm going to meditate on patience. So you meditate on patience during your interaction with that person. That's not going to shift your dislike for that person right away, right? You're still probably going to dislike them after cultivating that. It's going to take a lot of re-engagement and experimentation. And that relates to habituation, right? Our interactions with that person have established this habituation of a negative view of them. So when we first meditate on patience, it'll place some seeds for a little bit of a different perception. But because we're so habituated to a negative view of them, that perception's not going to shift right away. We have to use those subsequent interactions just to try to move the dial a little bit. And that's the way we come to change. So it actually, in the Buddhist understanding of the subtle body, and also in the scientific understanding of the subtle body, then somebody who sings a lot, they kind of develop a new chakra, a new energy channel or pathway. And then based upon developing that new chakra, whenever they sing, based upon all that previous habituation and training, they can tap in to that energy channel and sing very easily. It's not going to be like having to start from the beginning with, you know, a voice lacking power. So that's kind of how we have to train. And it's really important to be realistic that just trying something once or a couple of times is not going to shift the situation completely for us. It's just a beginning. But you're absolutely right in that principle of it's actually developing positive habits towards a different direction that is going to help us to be able to overcome that habituation to depression or whatever it is. Ane nipadi sangyum seri di karides. Also sangyum kora mambo chipla kiretua.
Yes, when you said it there, tango let's say to one let's handle that Zama unit I live in your patch was also near to that's it, Toyina.
Yeah.
I will forget up in it, let's say to young So
a consort is a wisdom mother. So the other side of the couple so you're one part of the couple, and then so it's your partner in the couple who you engage in union with in order to achieve realization. But again, just to clarify, Geshe talked about what kind of things you need to be able to do to be worthy of that practice. And if you engage in that practice before you are worthy, it becomes a cause for hell rather than a cause for enlightenment. So that's something to keep in mind. So it said when you come very close to enlightenment, right? Very high level, very close to enlightenment, in order to kind of open certain chakras or energy channels within your body and move the winds through them, taking on a consort can be helpful. Yeah. But Geshe's general advice is that if you meet anybody who claims to be realized and to have a consort, or that their partner is a dakini or whatever, you have to give the test, which is, okay, point to that tree, make all of the leaves fall off it, and then point to that tree again and make all of the leaves reattach. Then they can say that they're in a relationship with a dakini, or that they have a consort or something. Otherwise, not so much.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Talk. Semchindi. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that was done in the past to test whether people were suitable for this practice was they would go to a cemetery and they would be able to experience the flesh of a body in the cemetery as being like nectar. So it's a very high realization of transformation that's required to engage in that practice. Otherwise, we don't need to worry about it. Another thing that's given in the examples of the great Mahasiddhas is they were able to eat a sentient being like a fish or something, and then they were able to use the bones to bring that fish back to life and have it jump it back in the water. So that's another example of somebody who's suitable to do that practice. Yeah.
This
So if, for example, if you were to eat a chicken for dinner, you would be able to bring that chicken back to life in exactly the same form it had before you ate it. That's the level of realization that's required. Yeah, so then often people would want to do this practice, right? People always want to do the really advanced stuff. And they would go to their teacher, and then their teacher would say, okay, do that. You know, eat a chicken and bring it back to life or something. Then you can do it. So, you know, you have to, first of all, to get permission from a teacher, and a teacher who's really able to see whether you've got the level of control over your winds and the realization necessary for such a practice. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. So hopefully that answered the question about that.
I thought it might have been like a physical partner.
Yes, that's what it is.
So we should never get married or have kids?
How did you get that? So Geshe said, but why would you think that you're not allowed to get married? Because the verse was about monks and nuns, right? So of course, if you're a lay person and you get married, then there's no problem. Yeah. Geshe says the verses are very clear. It's people who have taken vows of celibacy.
Jabo anda mati sunji le teba chiwa chene la. Ta nga jabo to kanga jwa to ma dus pogo to cheme to kanga.
Yeah.
Tagaru den nga sunji san ro to chi suru chi is.
And also Indrabhuti, to whom the Guhya Samaja Tantra was spoken, he was a king, so he had a lot of worldly responsibilities. He was also married, so he had a responsibility to his spouse and to his children. And he asked the Buddha to propose a method for him to be able to cultivate the path as a layperson. So, so the Buddha proposed a path for him. Sorry, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
There is a ta ko poro umbo se to chi ren was.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
There is a call nga ta ta ma ja ti ne la.
Yeah.
Wa se to jo de call ten ma se ter sunji so res.
Yeah. And in that lifetime, right, as a layperson with all of those responsibilities from receiving the appropriate instruction, he was able to become a king. So I think I know what the problem is here. Maybe because I think other people may have misunderstood as well. Like if you don't have the text in front of you, I think we gave the link, right? But we didn't have the text on the screen. Here that we're talking about monks and nuns here, right? So that's the audience for the text. So yeah, no, we're not discouraging marriage. Yeah. So Geshe he wants to be very clear. He's not discouraging people from marriage or saying that it's a fault. We're discouraging monks and nuns from not maintaining their vows of celibacy. That's what's yeah. So of course, I mean, as married people, you are engaging in those activities and you try to do so in a way that is not harmful and in a way that respects both people and doesn't generate too much attachment. Of course, that's fine.
This way.
Yeah. Did I answer your question, Emily? Did we lose her? Is she still there?
Yeah, very, very much. And I appreciate other people may have had other questions. And thank you for the explanation.
No, thank you, Emily, for asking it, because I do think we didn't have the text on the screen. So I think many other people may have thought the same thing that you did. So it's good to, to ask that, because we don't want to give people that impression that you can't get married. It's no problem.
Geshe
said there's many lay people, many married people who in one lifetime achieved enlightenment, just like many monks and nuns. Yeah. Yes, Dave, I see your hand. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yes. So the question from Facebook is, what can help clear away the anguish that can come from worry? I guess this is compassion out of balance. But when love is so great, one can get stuck in a state of worry. Well, I can. And I would like to clear away the sadness and anxiety that can sometimes come from worry of the wellness of others, especially those closest to us. But worry does serve anyone. Yet there it is. Thank you in advance for your response.
So, semche langye de la tene dunge mambuchik yongi res. Yine samsam jampa la tene semche duga drogi res karin sen nganso miden so yapo chago res sengi kibo dabuchik gogire duas roa dene di samlo tane dene de la tene semche chik yongi res. Mi tanya po yena semche tsele gawas roa dene jampa semche dang simpegi jampa di kandes semche kandes nyungru tang res.
That dembore, and it's also a chesa mandu, so some language in Mandona, so Shomba Yard in Mandonil, who can get you good at the Moravas. So some language in Mandona,
so often when we care about or when we love somebody, we want the best for them, right? And then when the best things are not happening in their lives, we get worried, right? We feel anxiety.
Oh, that the Nigalata, also some language in Rogame, that I was Tani, so okay. Led to the Nigal, what you are. That's also so to your boy, the boy in Tanga, you are to Tobas, is.
So Geshe said one thing that he finds really helpful, it might not be helpful for everyone, but that he finds really helpful is when the people we love, when their lives aren't going as we would expect, when the things that we're hoping for them are not happening. If they're close to us, like a family member, we can try to help them a little bit on the karmic level. we can accumulate merit and purify negativities, engage in those practices, and then dedicate them to that person. And that doesn't mean that they'll naturally achieve all those things, but it means that maybe they'll get a little bit of help towards something better.
그 소소가 소만 놓지 만전에 디가 소소를 셀 강에서 할 패턴도 뭐도 대 패턴 매바 시고서는 다 소소 그게 소와 여보든 요지 매랬다.
But it's really a question connected like we had previously with habituation. You know, we see that worry arises when things are not happening for the person close to us in the way that we think that they should. So then the question you have to ask yourself is, does my worrying about that change the outcome for that person or not? And then the answer to that is no. And then you start to question, well, why worry? That can also help one to let go of it.
배다서 시원도 왔어. 배나자와 도지 쳔바이는 다 배. 손수 자 배려고 할래 뭐 왔어. 할래 배서 배디지벌이 이나요. 손수 여보 뭐 줘. 손만우진 더금도 왔어. 이나요. 그게 손수 여보리 논적금도 왔어. 손바테 뭐.
So we can see an example of somebody who manages all this. If we look towards His Holiness the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has affinities and aspirations for a huge group of people. If we think specifically about the example of Tibet, wishing better things for Tibet, autonomy, practical freedom, and things like that. And His Holiness has not been able to have those aims completely fulfilled. However, he continues to dedicate towards them and to maintain a happy mind, not being disturbed by that. And we look at one of the other things that His Holiness, beyond the Tibetan cause, is just being dedicated to greater peace and harmony, to world peace. And of course, when we look at the world today, it doesn't seem like that world peace is manifesting. In fact, if anything, it seems like it's farther away than it was previously.
But despite
that, His Holiness's love and compassion remains unchanged, right? His spirit is not discouraged, and he continues with the courageous, with the brave attitude to continually work for the benefit of beings. So we want to have that kind of resilience. So maybe we can't maintain sort of a mind that is that vast, but what we do want to do is just try not to let the disturbing state of things degenerate our love and compassion. Try to hold on and nourish the love and compassion that you have. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great.
Was there anything else, Dave?
Yes, there was a second question.
Yeah.
Let me find it. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So this is regarding the metaphor of the seed.
Yeah.
Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, can only change its forms. Upholding causation principle, can't we say the seed only evolved as flower?
I don't understand the last part.
Yeah, I asked
that
them,
last line. I don't understand it at all.
Yeah, I asked them to elaborate on that last line. Can't we say that seed only evolved as flower?
I kind of really felt like I knew where the question was going until we got to that last line. And then when we got to the last line, I'm kind of confused.
Yeah, I asked them to elaborate. They haven't responded. So
maybe we have to leave it for now. The person can just clarify that last line or ask it again in the future. So, Geshe says Kedrup's pretending it's confusing because he doesn't. I'm not. I promise.
I'm pretending too.
He says he needs a toilet break. Any other questions, Dave?
Then there's the last question from Steve.
Yeah.
Not Steve, sorry, Robert.
Robert, yes.
Yeah. So Robert's actually also interested in revisiting these 6 forms of clairvoyance from last week.
Right. So Mañjuśrī Truk Din so he wants just like the names of them again, or
Maybe if Robert's still here and he wishes, he can elaborate.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. I had to leave early, so I didn't get to hear the names of them. I don't need a
right.
voice.
Right. Okay, no, we can do that. Ngunchi truk ko ngama ngapo padro guchun so ngunchi truk ko tu masong di ngunchi truk kare desa.
Ngeshi to Kareta, Nishi to Narutemas, Shawashi Bingeshi,
Yeah.
Genji Seshi Bingeshi,
Yeah.
Nenjane Giste Bingeshi,
Huh?
Ne
Ne.
Shawalasak Net Bingeshi.
Yes.
Ane,
Yeah.
Nikar.
Ti hamako. Geshe and
Shall
I
you making a she?
Huh?
Shall you making a she? So
yeah.
making a she, lying a she.
Oh, yes. So we aren't able to remember all of them, but I think we have 5 of them for you, Robert. I don't have the list in front of me, neither does Geshe. So clairvoyance, clairaudience, knowledge of other worlds, knowledge of past and future lives, knowledge of others' minds. And I think the last one may be wisdom knowledge, but I'm not sure.
She lost Sabase being a she. Sabase being a she.
So, oh, yes, sorry. And the knowledge of the extinction of the contaminated, So those are the 6.
Sabase being a she, the Datumala to Yamaris.
And the knowledge of the cessation of the contaminated is not possible by an ordinary being. That's a type of clairvoyance that is only possible for a photostroid. So the other ones, clairvoyance, clairaudience, knowing others' minds, past and future lives, other worlds, these are possible for those who achieve high levels of concentration in both Buddhist and non-Buddhist systems.
Can you say that the one that is only for photostroyers again, please?
Yeah, Ja Chompa Chipodi Sagpa. Yes. So the knowledge of the extinction of the contaminated. So Geshe was just clarifying, the contaminated here refers to the afflictions. So it's a clairvoyance that is related to the abandonment of the afflictions.
Yeah.
So clairvoyance and clairaudience, Geshe is saying, these two, if you give the full terms, it's the clairvoyance of the divine ear and the clairaudience of the divine ear, and the clairvoyance of the divine eye. Knowledge of past and future lifetimes, knowledge of others' minds, knowledge of other realms. So hopefully that got them for you, Robert. Guess we can. Anything else, Dave? I see.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that it? Okay. All
That's
right.
it from
Yeah.
streaming. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. If there's no further questions, then I guess we will leave you here. You'll get a break from Geshe and myself for 2 weeks. I mean, maybe that's a good thing, especially speaking. Maybe you need a break from Kadrup, but we will be back the 2nd week of September, and Geshe will be starting on the text of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara and the Heart Sutra. And please do check out our event with Yangten Rinpoche this Friday. Unfortunately for folks in Europe, it's in the evening, but everything will be available on Facebook and YouTube from what I understand. So enjoy your time, everybody. And for those of you in the Netherlands, we'll see you soon.
Yeah,
Thank you. Safe
Thank
journey.
you.